This is going to be a long one. So, get this. I'm playing through Watch Dogs Legion, sadly, and I'm starting up the game, and due to purchasing the full season pass, sadly, I have access to the once iconic, forever forgotten Aiden Pierce. Okay. I play around with him for a little bit. He's the most broken character in the game because, of course he is. He's a borderline microtransaction, and I play Dress Up Darling with him and turn him into a mid-2010s hype beast for the funny. Yet something sticks out to me like a sore thumb. This isn't Aiden Pierce. It looks like him. He has the same voice actor, Noam Jenkins, and he even has that iconic baseball cap. Yet, despite all of this, I felt the sense that an ancient evil had taken over Aiden's skin suit and decided to run around fictional England wearing it. I had to ask myself, what happened? Despite me not really liking Aiden at all, spoilers for later in the video, I had to stop myself and say, man, if I were an Aiden Pierce fan, I would probably hate what they did to him here. I felt that way with many an Ubisoft character. In fact, the best thing Ubisoft's ever done was let Altair and Ezio rest. God damn. So, then another question followed suit. How is this game so bad that I'm giving Watch Dogs 1 any benefit of the doubt? And the thesis goes as follows. I have spent most of my teenage and adult life trying to figure out the answer to a question that has been gnawing away at my brain. For such a flat and underwhelming experience most of the games are, why do I have such a vicious distaste for the Watch Dogs franchise? I admit, there was a time when I genuinely did like this first game, but that happened to be when I was a 12-year-old that didn't really interact with games as a full medium, only liking the cool shooty parts of the games. And as I grew older and either replayed the game myself and watched others talk about it, I grew to distance myself from the first Watch Dogs game. Which is fine and dandy. People do that constantly with all kinds of things. But there was just one thing nagging at me. People. I don't know how many times I was told that I'm just missing something or that Watch Dogs 1 is actually a deep neo-noir story with a great main character. It felt like I couldn't genuinely talk about this game without getting a big no you from people. I tried replaying this game to find something deeper, something that grabbed a bunch of other people and failed to grab me. I went back myself to confirm if my feelings held up. I've always tried to position Watch Dogs as a guilty pleasure type game, a sort of compromise between disliking what it does with its narrative and gameplay loop, but going back to this game just confirmed further feelings for me. So, surprise, surprise, the Watch Dogs series is developed and published by Ubisoft, mid-2010s Ubisoft to be specific. I made a video a couple months ago that was supposed to lead into this video, you can check it out right here, but the gist of it is that I spent a lot of time defending the Ubisoft open world formula, despite the popular opinion. I quite like sinking my teeth into sandboxes that don't take too much time out for me to play. So, apply the checklist activity mindset to an urban open world, and what do you get? Well, you get a few outcomes. You could do something like the Saboteur or Just Cause 3, where the overall objective is to cause chaos to every square inch of an open world. You can take it to new heights like Assassin's Creed, where many players would find joy in scaling buildings swiftly in record time. Or you can take the Agents of Mayhem and Saints Row 2022 approach and suck badly. The normal Ubisoft formula is this double-edged sword. The edge that hits the hardest in the good spots is the core gameplay being tight enough for a story experience that complements a specific gameplay style. It's a size-fits-all for most of Ubisoft's series. However, if the sword flies out of their grip, leaving a bloody puddle, something genuinely broken, a thematic mess like Watch Dogs happens. Watch Dogs uses the standard Ubisoft formula for most of its gameplay. Recycled objectives across every mode, across different levels, with heaps of side content to boot. For the most part, everything works fine. For console players, PC players get no mercy. The gunplay is standard pop and shoot. Outposts and racing are the typical affair, despite two of those three gameplay styles feeling out of place, and the hack everything with one button mantra the game was sold with works out well enough. Watch Dogs, content-wise, is exactly the game that you would expect when you saw that purple swirl logo on the game case, which might be its biggest detriment. The part that is often criticized with Ubisoft's formula that resonates with me the most is their absolute unwillingness in the mid-2010s to actually take it anywhere different. Emergent freedom was sacrificed in the formulaic soup that Ubisoft had cooked up. Hell, Watch Dogs, despite the complaints of graphical downgrades from an E3 vertical slice, wasn't even the biggest victim in this. I swear I couldn't go a day in 2014 without seeing Headless Arno on social media, and when I played Far Cry Primal recently, my Smilodon would just clip through the floor on summon. Watch Dogs gave me less technical grief than most Ubisoft PC ports, which isn't saying much with that company's track record. Honestly, I wouldn't even say that the graphical downgrade was that intense. Watch Dogs still looks better than the majority of open-world crime games at the time. It has this intensely dreary atmosphere, and the lighting effects during the game's more scripted moments stand out a lot. The phone lighting bouncing off of Aiden's cowl, the flicker of stage lights attempting to turn on after a blackout. I'll say what I want about this game, but it really does know how to present itself during its linear set pieces. That careful presentation sort of falls apart when you reach the open world. Yeah, Chicago's still gray and dull, but that sadly applies to the civilian life too. The most you might get out of a street event is some people huddling around a boombox, or a purse snatcher that Aiden can pursue, or any other sort of crime that the city-based operating systems can predict. There isn't much to get out of Chicago's actual open world except for the activities. So how do those stack up against Watch Dogs' gameplay loop? Watch Dogs has a ton going on under the hood, such as a GTA-inspired sticky aim where centered mass is given priority so the player can slowly move up a character's skull and then nail them. Fair enough. There's a light predator stealth style system where quickly dispatching every enemy in the area is encouraged over full avoidance and guard routes. Okay, also fair. Players can pop a bullet time ability, allowing for better focus during these stealth encounters, a little busted for a straightforward video game, but it's probably indicative of a bigger challenge in these arenas. Here's the funny part. Watch Dogs' stealth AI is completely dull. Running past enemies works most of the time. So long as an enemy isn't gazing upon you with their narrow cone of vision, they will ignore you whacking away at their buddy. The AI cannot handle you shooting at them from more than 10 feet away. Hitting them with bullets seems to mildly inconvenience them as opposed to direct line of sight, which we've already established as ridiculously forgiving. The AI is so dumb that stealth is a rather fruitless option and the less fun option most of the time. And you might be saying, Kes, open world AIs tend to be on the dumber side, and you'd be right. But this is the same company that made Far Cry, and Far Cry's AI isn't nearly as dumb as this. Assassin's Creed had dumb AI in its early years, but that was more than made up for with interesting ways to get around the world, as opposed to the simple modern-day flourish that Watch Dogs goes for. That's what caused my primary stagnation with this game. My desires to interact with this game on a mechanical level shattered because one of the core mechanics is this busted and unfun. Almost every stealth encounter in the main story plays out exactly the same, laborious and bland. This game's often touted as the perfect John Wick sim, but honestly, I feel that's incredibly shallow to attribute John Wick's excellent action to smacking the aim button until you lock onto somebody, or pressing a button when watching a canned melee animation. The unique aspects of Watch Dogs' gameplay happen to be some of the new ideas presented for the Ubisoft formula, such as taking down convoys containing 3 to 5 cars 20 times over and over, or story-adjacent collectibles that don't do much to compel me aside for grabbing a new weapon or car. Not to mention how limited the hacking feels. I get that in the context of our story, our main character isn't computer smarts over light-footed combat, but the hacks available boil down to just distractions or explosions, things that I can already accomplish with the simple crafting system. The one thing I can give this game, thankfully, is that the map of Chicago, while bland and lifeless and lacking in small details that other open worlds have, is structured for interesting getaway encounters. Tons of alleyways to sneak through, you can blast through outlet malls. This all makes sense because at one point in development, Watch Dogs was supposed to be the next driver game. But none of that matters at the end of the day if the pursuit systems in place are so basic and easy to manipulate. Being able to slow my car down to a snail's pace during getaways because I pressed the flashing QTE in the generous window of time that it gave me is not compelling in the slightest. Pursuits themselves are a chore too because of the stale driving. I never had trouble driving these cars, but anything that isn't a supercar or a muscle car just feels very dull. Truth be told, the one open world activity that I did enjoy the most were the criminal convoys, because if there is anything I like about this game, it's that when playing on realistic difficulty, full-on gunfights become the highlight of the entire game. It's sort of what kept me trucking on through the main campaign. Each time I was given the chance to go loud whenever I wasn't being told I couldn't by arbitrary objective design, I would just say fuck it, because that was the game at its most engaging. There is one thing unique to Watch Dogs 1's gameplay loop, and that's the concept of acting as an agent of unknown certainty and how that can affect gameplay significantly. This is the most highlighted in the online multiplayer component, hacking invasions. Half Dark Souls, half Assassin's Creed, one player willingly enters another player's world undetected and plays with the role of social engineer to get closer to the invaded's data. The game ends when the invader is spotted or killed, or if the invader gets their progress bar to 100. There are many more multiplayer modes in this game, like typical deathmatch and racing, and an experimental companion app experience where the mobile player plays as a CTOS support for a police chase, but that's not the meat and bones of the multiplayer experience. I think Ubisoft probably asked themselves the question, can we fit those ideas into an urban open world consistently, instead of should we? The chips are there for a much more condensed linear experience, and it feels like the linear set pieces got the most love. I know the answer is simple, though. Money, a common theme of greed through Ubisoft's grip on this series. So, the gameplay's pretty rough, but an interesting story could sort things out, right? I've played many a game with mediocre to infuriating gameplay just to power through interesting stories before, and it's not something that I'm opposed to doing these days at all. I should say this about Watch Dogs' story. At first, I thought my main complaint with the story would revolve around the character Aiden Pierce. When I had the first draft of this essay typed up, I was a hell of a lot less charitable than just Aiden, despite admiring the cloth his character tropes are cut from. The fatalistic badass with a bone to pick is easy to like through and through. It's just at first I didn't see his character. I chalked it up due to a lack of character, simply being the exposition man, but that would also be damning on my part. I've loved much more stoic characters or quiet characters for much less than Aiden Pierce. Playing through Legion's base game sparked a bit of a rewrite for this project, and I realized that the problem is less Aiden, but it is the entire world that's written around him for him. Aiden's aggressive, he's tactical, and he never lets go of his cool at all. He's callous, and he does seem to have a misplaced care for his family, and his minimally verbal dynamic with his nephew Jackson is one of the better ones in the game, and later on in the series. The first 20 minutes of Watch Dogs set up Aiden as not just a tragic, fatalistic figure bound by noir tropes, but rather completely broken. His apartment is covered in pinpoints and pictures of his dead niece Lena, and he revels in the idea that the Central Operating System, or the CTOS for short, gives him access to predictive algorithms that allow him to strike punitive justice in the heart of Chicago. It sets up this certain mood, that you're going to be following the digital footprint trail of an intensely broken man taking his anger out on the world. But unfortunately, this doesn't last very long. If I could point to the moment that Watch Dogs breaks in twain as a narrative, it would be during the mission Big Brother. The dialogue is odd, not in the way that an emotionally detached family would communicate, but just straight odd. Nikki gets a crank call, and without irony, Aiden slips into her car, chases the crook down, and as Nikki calls Aiden, he fakes a signal error with mouth static sounds, while the player is most likely causing an explosive traffic pileup and gunning the guy down. Yeah, that's a lot to unpack there. If it wasn't clear there, Watch Dogs is going to bend over backwards to justify most of Aiden's actions in the self-serious narrative. Through a majority of this series, not just the game, Aiden is treated by nearly everyone as royalty, as a beacon of hope in a shitty system. Despite what the game is saying with his physical actions being abhorrently disgusting, Ubisoft would like you to suspend your disbelief and think he's the top shit for a little bit. In their words, he's iconic. It's written all over the slimy extra deluxe special editions for the game. Aiden Pierce's iconic hat, for example. He is iconography. He is supposed to be the protector of justice, not a deranged loser who managed to get his hands on some OS scripts. But despite all of that, how does the game try to convince people otherwise? Through the careful art of bending the entire fiction over backwards for the protagonist. The entire game is filled with comically evil gotchas at most point, with every villain out-eviling the last, so it distracts you from how truly bad Aiden is himself. It believes that if the game throws enough evil at you, players can come to the conclusion of, he's just cleaning up scum. At first, it's Derma Quinn, a ruthless Irish mob boss who has ties to Aiden's niece's death and who kills his own men in such a cliche fashion to scare his subordinates. Then it's off to a gang leader nicknamed Iraq, who kills his men in such cliche fashion to scare his subordinates and lives in what I can only describe as a megaplex crack den, protecting blackmail information for Quinn against the city's mayor. The plot then shifts to a sex slavery storyline, and to kick it off, Aiden has to kill an Irish expat named Crispin to grab his identity because no one would miss him. It's then revealed that he was a super scary cannibal man, and it was okay to kill him because, of course, nobody in this world made by Ubisoft is right in the head or even morally gray. Then it's off to fight Deadmau5 for no reason outside of padding. The game forgets about all of these villains quite often, flip-flopping between plot points instead of wrapping one up at a time, or in the case of DJ Default, it's just there for padding and to have a random place to put the infamous E3 set piece. These are all comic book villains, wrapped up in the comic book world, expecting you to take all of this dead seriously. In front of all this is the main villain, Damian Brinks, who is excessively edgy and excessively boring. And due to him being Aiden's foil, he only works if the character being foiled is easy to follow and likable. To compare Aiden to the rest of his supporting cast, the only two characters I could stand were Jordy Chin and T-Bone Grady. Jordy is the only character with a shred of goddamn self-awareness. He knows he's an unfettered piece of shit. He jokes about his crimes constantly, not because he thinks he's a better person, but because he thinks he's the best damn fixer around. He sort of channels this Johnny Gat-like personality, levity to a game that takes itself way too damn serious, and his vibes are contagious when they really shouldn't be. I don't like T-Bone in this game as much as I do later on in the series, but T-Bone's presence as the legendary engineer who made the CTOS is interesting when you learn that he attempted to destroy the system because he saw how bad things could go, a sort of tortured artist approach to the character. Quite literally, too, one of the game's best moments is this shootout between Bloom and the two hackers in T-Bone's abode in Pawnee, strewn with lethal metal machines while blaring Ministry's Jesus Built My Hot Rod, showing 13-year-old me how cool industrial music is, and showing current me that this game can really make you feel something if it tried. Other than those two, Aiden has two more allies. Tobias Frewer, who sells Aiden gadgets after he got the shit beaten out of him during a game of basement poker, and to my disdain, Clara Lyle. Clara probably sucks just as bad as Aiden does. 2 peas in a pod, 2 bullets in a mag, 2 internet trolls with access to firearms. Though, while Aiden does some pretty disturbing shit, there isn't much that he says that pisses me off. I tend to just laugh at this guy's wimpy quips, like, "I'm coming to you armed and dangerous," really gets the stomach rolling. However, snarking while saying stuff like, "She just recently had an abortion, probably why she's seeing that therapist," crosses a line of such fucking unlikability that I'm surprised I'm hearing that from a real AAA game instead of an edgy RPG Maker indie game. It's no wonder the game wants you so badly to think that these two are lovebirds. Should Clara had lived, Aiden and her would have lived happily ever after, as happy as 2 antisocial murder junkies would have. I'd be lying if I didn't say that there were a few morally gray characters in this game. Bedbug, the cousin of Iraq, the leader of the Black Viceroy gang, seems to be caught up in the troubles of being a good gang member. He lives with Grandma and does just as Cousin Delford tells him to do, so he can get on his feet and prove to everyone that he can do real man shit, which could be compelling. The link between gang violence and proof of one's manhood are real and toxic things. The problems arise when Bedbug just plays out in the most generic way possible. He turns coat for Aiden, as Aiden of course has blackmail on him, and ends up getting caught by Iraq when stealing from him, appears to be killed, and then you learn that he actually lived. He's just a plot tool rather than an interesting insight. Not as if we were going to get anything like that. This is the plot point with the mega crack den after all. Aiden faces Iraq after getting T-Bone out of Pawnee, but holy shit, is it one of the lamest boss fights ever. Iraq shouts everything you'd expect a violent man named Iraq to say. "I used to carry motherfuckers like you off the battlefield. Don't bring war to a soldier, boy." And he doesn't come out armored to face you. No, it's just one heavy in himself, but he also has the parameters of a heavy with a little more health. It's so deeply unsatisfying and just plain bad. It didn't help that I kept dying at this part because of the tight arena and spawns. I had to sit through Iraq's entire turtle-paced speech 3 times over. I'm barely going to mention Default in this section. Hell, the game barely mentions him too. He's just as annoying and out of place in the setting, and his only plot relevance is to spur the tease tension of Clara being the person who found Aiden for Quinn's hit, and to pad the story by hacking into Aiden's HQ. The only character with a modicum of realism whatsoever in this game is Yolanda, Jackson's therapist, who takes over nanny duties when Nikki is busy with stuff like groceries or is being used as a plot device. Yolanda clocks Aiden as a complete ass the second time she meets him, and who couldn't with all that shady main character energy outfit he's got going on. She threatens to call services on him multiple times, but when he slips away for the last time after the final battle, she decides to write a book on her experiences with the Fox, and probably the stuff the Pierces vented about Uncle Aiden over. I blame this scene in particular for setting up this idea that Aiden is actually the smart and conniving individual, when in reality, it's just the world around him was written to be stupid and vapid, which is my biggest problem with Watch Dogs as a narrative. Watch Dogs is incredibly lowbrow and mean-spirited, and it has to be at nearly every corner comically so, to the point where it is hard to take anything seriously at all. I hear this talk about maturity in gaming all the time, if and when game stories can be taken nearly as seriously as books. And while I agree that there is a ton of cases of real maturity in video games, shameless Max Payne video plug, I feel like Ubisoft sets the mainstream back every 20 years every time they release another game. Most Ubisoft games are repugnantly nihilistic, immaturity wrapped up in asking a question to the player over and over again to posture being deep. This game is extrajudicial justice. With Far Cry 3, it was insanity until they dropped that angle halfway through to butcher what was left of Jason Brody's character. It's this song and dance for this company through and through. The Pierces themselves are a rather broken family, with single mother Nikki having to raise her son Jax after the death of her daughter Lena, who the whole game is used as the catalyst for Aiden's acts of violence. Nikki is kidnapped by Damien as her real plot relevance is revealed. She's just there to add drama to the plot and nothing else. She's a rather milquetoast depiction of grief and broken families. After all, she's had to go through that twice, once during her early childhood when Mama Pierce took them away from their abusive dad to America, and now. She's so bland because the game wants you to care about the objective of saving her more than making her a character herself. If it feels like I'm bouncing all over the place describing my gripes at the plot, it's because the game does this too. Plot points are often abandoned in the middle of each other, leading to points of dead space in between each narrative thread. It isn't hard to follow, but it is just so fucking annoying to be close to finishing a plot thread only for Aiden to be wrangled up and tied up in a completely unrelated thread the next second. It feels as if the writers were playing this game of corporate tug-of-war, deciding if Aiden should aura farm in Rossi Fremont or Pawnee next. To break away from some of the negativity a little bit, let's talk about Jax. Aiden's nephew suffers great trauma from the assault that nearly killed him and took his sister, and is very shut in because of it. Yet, because of his rather atypical gung-ho nature when he gets kidnapped, he's often compared to his uncle Aiden, always diving in head first, getting into trouble in an attempt to save the people he loves without realizing how in over his head he's getting. Later on in the series, you see this projection get to him and mold him into the likable guy he turns out to be in the Legion DLC. But that's a topic for later. Halfway through the game, Jax is trapped in a facility surrounded by goons and asks dear Uncle Aiden to come take care of it, and unfortunately, this is where things get negative again. So, the player is typically given a choice of non-lethal engagement in the form of the baton, which is funny because none of these animations look non-lethal, but I guess it counts as such. A quick and crafty player could set up most encounters to not fire a single bullet at the enemy, even when things become combat-centric later on in the battle at hand. Upon finding Jax, the kid recoils away from Aiden as the grizzled Unk looks at the camera feed, with bodies on bodies stacked up on top of each other, forcing Aiden into a guilt trip, unmasking his crimes. This is the same guy that has blown up countless city infrastructure and cars in the street, and his breaking point is a scripted sequence that could have been completely avoided if Ubisoft actually trusted their player base. Which is also insane to me because not one mission later, Aiden finds out where Nikki's being held, and this is probably the only moment the game showed mechanical competence the entire time playing it. I knew coming in I'd have to do one of those terrible camera recon missions, the same style of mission from the Bedbug segment, but my curiosity was piqued when I saw that the enemies surrounding Nikki were able to be dispatched before I interacted with that sequence. I killed them all, thinking that the game would just reset their spawns, but instead was met with the reward of ignoring that piece of content entirely, which, hey, the less of these things I have to do, the happier I am. It ultimately ends up with the family getting out of Dodge after Aiden inevitably saves Nikki because of the plot convenience of making the supposedly smart villain really stupid for a moment. Nikki comes out to realize that Aiden is the vigilante, but then waxes on nostalgically about their past for no reason during a police chase. The three Pierces leave Pawnee and give one last goodbye to Aiden in such an embarrassing scene. The game has one moment to show that Aiden is going to suffer real consequences after murdering hundreds of people to chase a feeling he will never get back. His family should want nothing to do with them, and to an extent, that is true. Nikki will never interact with Aiden again for the rest of the series, but the way the game sends her off gets under my skin so much. She waxes nostalgically again, which is completely inappropriate for a situation like this and lets this guy off lightly. There is no tension because Ubisoft is scared to write real tension in this game. I've learned two things with this scene. One, that Aiden likes hockey and cars despite nothing in his personality letting me know diegetically beforehand. And Nikki and the game at large aren't too disgusted at the fact that Aiden has been costuming up and murdering Italians and impoverished, and lets him off with a slap on the wrist. but not without hugging him first because he's just so tortured. Aiden won here, and what was supposed to be a pyrrhic victory thematically is just written in such a pussy-footed way that it comes across as flat. Aiden wanted to get them away from Chicago, maybe to go back to the UK, and he got that in exactly the way he wanted. Aiden's characterization itself is insanely mind-numbing. He doesn't actually have any lines in the game's general dialogue outside of exposition. Because I had watched a friend play the first half of the game, I wondered if you could skip cutscenes and still get the full gist of what was happening. I shit you not. You could probably play the entire game doing that because Aiden will just restate what happened in the previous cutscene all the time. Even cutscene Aiden is dreary to watch because he has absolutely no charisma with anybody in the main cast, not even his family, not even the character the game wants him to shack up with, just no one. He has gloomy monologues, but they all result in the same outcome. I gotta go here and play a pipe puzzle. Also, did you know that my niece is dead? There's one moment in this game that actually stood out to me completely, and that is during the penultimate mission, aptly named No Turning Back. Aiden stands back outside the Merlot, ready to put an end to Lucky Quinn during an event that he and the blackmailed mayor are hosting. Aiden shoots his way up to the hotel as Mayor Rushmore freaks out about his blackmailed Lucky Quinn, saying he wants out of the situation. While Quinn revels in the power trip he's received, Aiden makes it up to Quinn's office at the top level and finds him locked behind a plexiglass wall in the server room. With cops ascending to their floor, Aiden finds himself in a pinch, because by normal means, Aiden can't interrogate and kill Quinn, but does so by messing with the pacemaker in his heart, causing the old man to collapse from the torture. Quinn begs for his life and reveals that he thought Aiden wanted to steal Rushmore's blackmail tape during the first heist, and that's why he sent the hit out on him. And Aiden realizes for how something so inconsequential as data, his niece's life was taken from her. Telling him that Aiden is just as inconsequential to the world because his data is valued more than his life. Aiden takes this moment to realize what he's become. He's the vigilante. The city will look the other way once Quinn dies and gets really in his face about it. In his face about how the city he built would kill him, from the pacemaker in his heart to the crime he cultivated on the street. This interaction does have some of those noir elements that people swear up and down are in the entire game. The juxtaposition between the two characters' fates does hit those dark themes of fatalism and isn't afraid to shy away from them. But in the context of Watch Dogs, it just rings hollow. It does suck to have to sit through about 15 hours of boring exposition, a messy and easily distracted plot, and paper-thin characters just to get here. The game ends on such a gut punch in all the wrong ways. Clara dies in the most generic disturbed vixen way possible, even when the game doesn't earn this relationship dynamic between her and Aiden. It might be the only concrete loss Aiden suffers during the entire game that isn't, my niece is dead. But it doesn't work because it would have required that I actually gave a shit about Clara. It's quickly brushed aside as Damien sets the city up for chaos, after helping Aiden deliver the killing blow on the people around him, both for and against him. It's time for the dramatic final showdown. The city goes haywire and Aiden refuses CTOS access to DeadSec, a hacking collective mentioned quite a bit in this game. Aiden meets Damien on the lighthouse because of fucking course he asked to, and gets double-crossed by Jordy. Sorry pal, new contract, Chin states before getting his ass handed to him. Aiden unceremoniously kills Damien and pulls off such a self-aggrandizing stunt that makes me hate him even fucking more. I don't know what Damien wanted in those final moments. Death, I suppose. I thought I could fix a little girl's death, but instead it led to all of this. Exposed lies, corrupted kings, a broken city, and me, a changed man. I don't look back anymore. I don't regret. I look forward. Everything is connected, and I'll use that to expose, protect, and if necessary, to punish. Edgy monologue. The feeling of being big. I can't believe I wasted close to 20 hours of my fucking life watching a character go absolutely nowhere with his dynamics because the game just thinks he's perfect the way he is. This isn't character progression. This isn't even character regression. This is pure stagnation because he's already one of the good guys in Ubisoft's eyes. Aiden, as a character, symbolizes the mass capital appeal of counterculture and the desire to stand up for justice. Just for the game to 180 on those themes and present you with a character that has no real bone for justice in him. He does everything for himself, only hates when bad things happen to him and not others. And you'll gladly take away from anyone who gets in his way, innocence be damned. Aiden Pierce isn't deep, and this game's single player isn't good, and I'm tired of being asked why I think this. The answers are all laid out, and for a game centered around finding the truth, I find the few people that do like this game don't like it as a simple, cheesy revenge story that has a few inconsistencies, but because they try to look past the truth of the game for a deeper meaning that just isn't there. As a flat-out revenge story, Watch Dogs falls on its face. I was never given time to connect with Lena or Nikki as characters. They were fridged immediately before I could care. Writers cannot just tell someone to care about something, they need to show why someone would care. Despite the long-winded intro and tutorial, AC3 was able to set up Haytham Kenway and the Templars as a valid threat because we got to spend time in the shoes of Haytham, and the graphic introduction of Connor Kenway's motives. I can't help but feel like this game's writing may have been an overcorrection to that criticism of AC3's long intro, only because most players' problems with that intro weren't with the writing, but how slow the tutorial and onboarding process was compared to the other 4 games in the series. Even then, Aiden's revenge against Damien rings so hollow because of how much his presence is played up to be this master manipulator of computers and tech, but he fails at every step and comes across as very inept at his crimes in the first place. This isn't to mention this game's ass-backwards attempt to portray dystopia. The CTOS is verbally positioned to be a very bad thing. Of course, it's baby's first political theory. I can get behind that. The internet being weaponized by private companies to spy on you and make your data more worth than a human life is bad. But Ubisoft asks, is it really that bad when you can make yourself stop trains with your fingertips and you can black out entire city blocks with an upgraded skill tree? Is it really that bad when you can spy on people doing unflattering things for a quick laugh? To this game, novelty is much more important than its main idea. Watch Dogs is not as serious as Ubisoft wants you to believe it is. It takes a deeply unserious narrative in a game world to say, oh, the corporation stealing from people is pretty bad, but here's a button shoved in your face that allows you to steal money from poor people's bank accounts. Or even, here's a reputation meter. You're only negatively affected by it when you kill civilians. Wanton destruction is alright, but you're always going to be the hero in the end. I'm sure I'll ruffle a few feathers here, so I do want to take the time to say that I did play through this game with a few enhancements made by the community. Most of the footage you see is played with the Watch Dogs E3 Definitive mod pack published by SeraphieX Rogueboy on Nexus Mods, and I'll be linking that in the description. This mod list isn't limited to PC port fixes, an attempt of replication of the game's E3 gameplay mechanics and graphics, cut animations, and bringing the PS4 exclusive content to PC. The biggest change, however, is the Living City mod by the Silver One, a massive project made to restore a ton of the cut content and even events for the Watch Dogs experience, such as making races playable offline, random events, unlocking mission interiors, and limiting the number of weapons you can carry on your person. It adds and replaces things such as overhauling the police scan system to something more realistic, adding Far Cry 3 style trials where you can only use what you've been given to clear an objective, and allows standard enemy pursuers to use the CTOS against you. I've played through this game in its vanilla form quite a lot before, 3 playthroughs over the last few years to be precise, so I wanted to see what the dedicated community for this game could do in its longevity. I'll break kayfabe here for a little bit. As much as I do not agree with the greater Watch Dogs community on the same things as them, I find it very admirable that the fans of the game want it to be the best it could be. These mods do as much as they can to fix the experience of the game. Systems like the reputation bar feel meaningful because at higher levels, Aiden can get jumped by fixers constantly, making playing low rep feel like a punishment rather than a suggestion. While the random events still only showcase the worst parts of Chicago, it's interesting to have more happening with pedestrians than nothing happening at all. Hell, the cut version of the police system in this game is actually interesting, because I'd actually get in trouble for breaking severe traffic laws or causing pileups and crashes in front of police officers, something you don't see in other games. It's a smarter experience than the base game, but that isn't saying much, and for me, it didn't save the bad parts of the game. Watch Dogs 1 isn't narratively unsalvageable, but gameplay-wise, you wouldn't need to do much but look at the DLC for that answer. Watch Dogs had a bit of post-launch content support after its initial release, fixing bugs, adding some new missions, and one new digital trip, those extra little game modes that you can access from the phone menu. The most substantial piece of content added was the expansion Bad Blood, where players would take up the mantle of T-Bone 1 year after the main game. I found myself in a weird state with this DLC. I did like it much more than the base game. I found reasons to like it. If we were on a star rating system, this would probably only go up half a star from what I would give to the base game. For starters, the tone of the game is actually consistent. Ubisoft Paris seemed to understand how toothless the world of Watch Dogs was in the eyes of Aiden, opting for a new perspective. T-Bone Grady fits the identity of Watch Dogs' urban warfare gameplay so much more than Aiden did. T-Bone is a character actively being hunted down by his past and not given time to rest, making him adapt to creating booby-trapped forts and new gadgets not seen in the base game. Grady, as protagonist, is much easier to stomach for me than Aiden because we got to actually learn a lot about him in the base game, about how his attempt at whistleblowing, while with good intent, caused the death of 11 people trying to get on with their day. Far from everyday normal life, but still close enough to bloom in the event that they try something against Chicago. T-Bone is a lot easier to understand morally, as most of the game has him either pulling favors for other people and protecting himself instead of causing most of his own problems. And even then, the big problem he caused for himself is much more sympathetic and built up than, my niece that was there for plot development is dead and I'm going to kill people now. One such person is Detective Sheila Billings, who asks him to clean up the gangs of Chicago in exchange for supplies and money. T-Bone's only able to take what he can get, so of course he accepts. What drew me to liking Bad Blood more than its base game? That would just be the structure of the campaign itself. The game only takes on one storyline, and that's finding out who's responsible for sending fixers after T-Bone and Tobias. The levels themselves are much more engaging than the levels in the base game. The difference in objective variety in this expansion is tenfold when compared to how things used to play out. With objectives ranging from using cameras with guns strapped to them, protecting Tobias from a sniper perch, or sneaking through neon mazes, the level variety in this game is much denser than Watch Dogs, despite only being a third of the length. However, that creeping feeling of mediocrity does come up quite a bit in the campaign, with things like the overabundance of pipe puzzles, tailing missions, and camera escort sections popping up from time to time, taking you out of what's otherwise an alright campaign experience. That's also something I found entertaining about this DLC. Even though the writing isn't anything amazing, the fact that characters like T-Bone and Foreword have to suffer consequences and tension is radically different than the base game. Foreword is even more strung out than he was earlier due to his guilt and his involvement in the 2003 blackout. He takes a ton of his frustration out on T-Bone, saying his life was so much better before he was dragged by him to become a whistleblower, seemingly blind to his own accountability. Throughout their relationship in the game, Foreword learns how to not project his own feelings on the T-Bone and works through taking accountability for something he pulled the trigger on too. T-Bone hasn't forgotten about his own demons, they haunt him constantly, and have now taken the form of the hacker Default, who is revealed to have had a brother who died during the blackout, putting the blame on T-Bone and placing a fixer contract out on him and Foreword. Bad Blood is a ton more playful with Watch Dogs' themes due to the much more mellowed out protagonist and tone. The dialogue between the two tech hobos is fun for the most parts, some cringe here and there like douche nozzle, but adds more charm and personality to the world instead of being so fucking dour all the time. Things get melodramatic, but in a fun, tongue-in-cheek way that makes some of the new campaign levels stand out to me, such as a rundown security firm revamped as a hitman stronghold, or the final level of the game, which tasks Grady and Foreword with running through a neon rat maze filled to the brim with electronic trickery. Even the new gadgets like the RC car can be fun. Emphasis on can be. For every unique and playful idea this game has, like camera turrets, co-op outposts, or T-Bone's arsenal of lethal art projects, the game still has to remind you that it is still Watch Dogs. The expansion would go on to add a myriad of things to the Watch Dogs gameplay loop and sandbox, such as the aforementioned RC drone. It could be used for on-the-ground recon or dispatching enemies without physical altercation. A new progression system for the open world was established in the form of the street sweep system, where players can repeat much harder outposts and driving content than the side content from the base game with co-op support. In theory, this should be a substantial upgrade to the base game experience, even considering that everything from the base game is here, sans the parts I like the least. As I said, in theory, all of this would only truly work if Watch Dogs as a mechanical base was improved on at all, and the short of it is that it wasn't whatsoever. Enemies are still as dumb as a bag of bricks, and the driving isn't still too much to write home about. Chicago still feels lifeless and vapid, and the base of compelling content really isn't there at all. Hell, I found this version of the game considerably worse in some areas. Take the street sweep activities, outposts and driving contracts that are made harder to compensate for the fact that all of them can be done co-op. Instead of taking down one enemy, you have to knock out two in a much more dense population of enemies. This system completely breaks apart due to two things. One, that I would subject somebody to playing Watch Dogs with me, and two, the RC car is easily the most broken thing in the game. You can just plop it down and enemies will not see it as you drive around outposts knocking out enemies. There is an option to craft another car after your first one breaks, but I kid you not, no one is ever going to use this unless they destroy the cars themselves, either via accident or if they have the explosive upgrade. The street sweep rewards do not do much to help either, even though I like the idea of tying power progression to doing content. The most powerful perk is unlocked after only doing two of these activities, that being the instant charge battery. Despite being a considerable upgrade in the writing and set piece departments, which isn't hard at all, Bad Blood still stumbles to be anything remotely close to competent or finished when compared to all of its other contemporaries, but you could tell that Ubisoft took a massive liking to some of the ideas presented in this expansion. The RC car serves as a prototype for some of the other Ubisoft games that use drones as support, such as Ghost Recon Wildlands and Breakpoint. Co-op activities would be the driving force for making full open-world co-op experiences, with the release of Far Cry 4 superseding it 2 months after this content drop. It feels like Watch Dogs is finally finding a real tonal shift within itself, trying so hard not to take itself deadly serious despite how deeply unserious the world it has established is. It would just take one more game to get there fully. The deeply unserious world of Watch Dogs 1 would prove to be impossible to follow up in the public by throwing around buzzwords like dark and gritty. I do know that this first installment has its fans and diehard defenders, but understanding Ubisoft first as a dollar-first company and an artistic merit company second meant that the sequel would need to make some changes or be drowned in the swarm of negative reception once again. But aside from the obvious surface-level changes, I honestly cannot find too much on a deeper level that makes Watch Dogs 2 this radical betrayal to the first game like most fans say it is. It's a direct continuation of the stupid lore in the world of the first game, but with a more vibrant take on the world and a much wider cast. A good chunk of the gameplay has been spruced up and upgraded, but the core of the first game's quick gunplay and piss-easy melee still remains. Multiplayer has added co-op missions, but aside from that, everything remains the same in terms of content except for the new playground. Yet, despite the core designs not changing much between games, despite this game not being any more mature than the first one, it was equal parts easy to love this time, and genuinely compelling, with most of the criticism of the last game being taken into account this time around. I'm not kidding when I say that. Every single course correction in this game feels like an earnest attempt at making a more careful and less dreary experience than the first game. Let's start off with the most important character itself, San Francisco. Chicago in the first game felt off. Despite the in-game version of the loop holding a ton of visual inspiration from its real-life counterpart, the rest of the game did not feel or look anything like Chicago or the greater area around it. Even then, the loop was filled with crazy inaccuracies to the point of confusion. Confusion as to why Ubisoft opted to set the game in a real-world city when it was just going to fictionalize 75% of the landmass and geography anyways. San Fran seems to be built with that criticism in mind, even if it isn't 100% accurate itself, which is fine. Asking to build the entirety of San Fran on the backbone of the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 is just unfeasible. Sacrifices are going to be made in small areas. For every downscaling of sites like the Point Bonito Lighthouse or Marin County itself, or the absence of the Sea Lions at Pier 39, places like the Castro District and obviously the Golden Gate Bridge are lovingly made to resemble their real-world counterparts as much as they can. Battery Spencer, one of the most iconic viewpoints of the Golden Gate Bridge and one of my favorite vistas in my limited experience of travel, is lovingly remade down to most detail, save for the little graffiti out of the game's release date, such as K-pop group member bias tally polls or remarks on pegging. Time does seem to be in this game's eyes too. This game, for better or worse depending on who you ask, feels like a time capsule back to 2016. Not just impact font memes and making fun of hipster culture, but written in the game are the themes of fear of technology rapidly growing, but with the 2016 lens of one of the worst things that could happen to us is robot spiders with guns, modern grounded and draining fears of AI and the cost of efficiency over human effort and creativity. It is a rare, and I mean fucking rare, self-aware stance for Ubisoft to just take a step back from making nihilistic content to just make something fun. If you were to take Watch Dogs 1 and put it next to the other works of nihilism and darkness under Ubisoft's darker catalog, you would see that Watch Dogs 1 isn't just on the weaker tier of storytelling and world building, but is dead last. What makes Far Cry 2 work so well is its adherence to its design principles, to make a player question why they're playing such a hostile game and if they enjoy it, because they sure as hell must be enjoying punching 50 caliber holes into convoy trucks for a handful of diamonds and malaria meds if they keep going. Whether it's the dreamy air of the unnamed African country or the rush of Far Cry's iconic prey-to-predator dynamic, something is there to keep it going. I know that I'm comparing Far Cry 2 to Watch Dogs, but Watch Dogs takes most of its mechanical knowledge from that game, and as much as the rest of Ubisoft's games up to 2015 did. It's like comparing gold to shit. It's one of Ubisoft and Clint Hawking's best titles, and trust me, we still have a lot more to talk about regarding Ubisoft, Clint Hawking, and Watch Dogs, but that is the standard that Ubisoft mostly failed to reach regarding a good chunk of their games going forward, Watch Dogs 1 especially. Ubisoft as artists aren't always about nihilism, even if as a company they realize the monetary potential for it. The Assassin's Creed series for the most part strays away from all of that, as its core themes are about hope and wisdom. It would be a little bit antithetical to maybe mixing all of those together, which is where a good chunk of the artistic core from Watch Dogs 2 comes from, that desire to make a world where the player wants to nurture, and not one that just promotes non-critical thinking and boredom like the first game. The world already has enough wanton destruction games. Ubisoft at this point has made 9 of them, and games like Saints Row 4, Sleeping Dogs, and Just Cause hit those itches as well. Watch Dogs being a series like that would always position it pretty close to dead last in those regards. Something needed to change fundamentally with the second game if Ubisoft wanted their GTA-like to have something to be remembered fondly over. That something special is the fact that the game is best played from a no-killing angle as much as you can in a game like this. Even as a pacifist, either through ghost stealth or slippery evasion, it's much more rewarding to the game's narrative than gunning down thousands of people. Not many open-world crime games allow me to nurture its world, but both in the context of the story and the gameplay. A big problem with Aiden was his wanton destruction. Despite being depicted as anywhere close to a hero figure, that symmetry of morals does not happen in an open-world crime game often, because it's in the name of the genre itself, crime. The genre itself is comically unserious, needing people to suspend your disbelief that characters like Trevor Phillips could commit all the crimes they can and still have the freedom to go do stupid shit like bowling or pool. It's the suspension of disbelief that allows players in Saints Row 2 as the boss to steal an ambulance and suddenly do saintly work. It's the same suspension that makes you believe that the boss wouldn't just walk over their corpse instead of helping them. I don't think Watch Dogs 2 is much smarter than the first one. There are a ton of problems with this game's tone too, but this game understands that its world is deeply unserious. Instead of engaging with it with darkness, turmoil, and a lack of direct humor, it engages with it by simply adding an empathetic touch, which is enough for me to care about this absurd world finally. That touch of empathy comes to us in the form of San Francisco's DedSec team, but mostly Marcus Holloway, the protagonist of this game. Marcus is such an immediate shift in tone and characterization off the bat that it caught my friends who had only played the first game off guard. Off rip, you already see that he dresses like a person with their head screwed on, right? He has much more flair in his animations, with him doing flips and dives during parkour runs, and just knowing when to be earnest. Marcus's motivations are also much more riveting off the bat. Instead of Taken with a slightly younger Irishman at the helm, Marcus was tagged by the CTOS as a high-risk criminal for daring to accidentally be near the scene of a robbery in his hometown in Oakland, ostracizing him for most jobs in a typical life. DedSec gives Marcus the opportunity to both flex his skills and wipe his name clean and begin a new life as Retro. While still a cliche, Marcus has more of a fun 90s techno movie backstory. That sets the rest of the tone for the game. Like the first game, it is thematically centered around 90s goofy hacker tones retrofitted to today's standards. But instead of hearing gruff voices say, "I'm in," with no sense of goddamn irony at all, you get a guy who's completely self-aware of his own humanity, so he says it because when else are you going to be able to say goofy shit like that? I just want to talk about how Marcus interacts with the world around him when compared to the other protagonists in the genre. Compared to most open-world protagonists, you get the sense that Marcus wants to be an active part of this game's world. The best way I could describe Marcus is how friend of the channel Eli saw when introduced to the second game. He's just a dude. He isn't some megalomaniac or asshole. He's just the guy who likes talking to people and making experience of life better for the people he cares about. The social engineering aspect of Watch Dogs 1 is something I hear discussed when the plot of the game is brought up, and I won't disagree there. Aiden is meant to be a social engineer, mainly through the guise of intimidation and threat, but is a social engineer nonetheless. What doesn't work about that game is the insistence of making it known that the world is Aiden's through the eyes of Aiden. Only Aiden has agency, which make the social engineering aspect come across as cringe and fall flat on its face. On the inverse, Marcus certainly is not the centerpiece of the game. The centerpiece is San Fran itself, and the life inside a fictional, inhumane tech bubble that values data over humanity. Marcus is not a shining beacon of hope, but just somebody who wants to make the world a better place both for the people willing to help him out and the people that want to help out, but can't due to either the cost of living or being dealt a bad hand. A core mechanic of the game is getting people to follow DedSec. The more followers, the more main missions one can partake in, and the more upgrades one can receive. It acts like a mix of the different versions of the respect systems from the Saints Row games, but instead of earning it up by blowing up people or drip maxing, it's earned by showing what DedSec and Marcus are capable of. One of the first activities I did in the game was Driver San Francisco, a little nod and callback to Ubisoft's On Ice racing series, and the game's taxi/Uber game mode. What separates this mode from other taxi modes in games is the interactions Marcus has with people verbally and the objectives of the activity itself. One such interaction has Marcus rushing a bride to her wedding, as she laments how bad her day is going and how the wedding is so ruined, and Marcus hits her with the, "If you love him, this day will matter despite all the bad things happening," line that seems to soothe her. There could be a much darker tone to these missions too sometimes, like a sports player who's on the phone with someone, scared about how his drug use is going to affect his career, and Marcus minds his business. Again, this is just scratching the smallest parts of a mechanically simple yet narratively gratifying handful of moments in the game. DedSec themselves are a rather interesting bunch, and I feel like they never get enough credit for how much they hold up this game's story for the most part. You have characters that people talk the most about, like Wrench, the extreme anarchist and weapons aficionado of the group, but even the characters that aren't mentioned in passing conversation, like Sitara and Josh, are pretty interesting themselves. Sitara acts as the main voice of the group, actively being the person in front of the camera during many of DedSec's PSAs, and the group's main artist. She's the person that actively instructs Marcus on his trial by fire, and is the first to welcome him into DedSec. Sitara is a fun character. A lot of the iconography in the game, such as the stencils Marcus can paint in the town, are her work in the context of the story. My favorite imagery in the entire series is the follower wall, this wall of CRT monitors and PC towers that serve as a mega monitor for the HQ. And as a massive monitor nerd myself, I can't help but love this imagery unironically. She comes from a better background than most of the characters in the game, appearing to be the only person in the group with a higher education, but she never stomps down on her peers and opts to give them a voice. Josh is one of the few canonically autistic characters that I've seen in a Western video game, and the depiction of the spectrum through him is an interesting one. And as an encryption genius, he serves as one of the few full-on hackers of the group rather than just relying on scripts. That makes his importance significant, but due to his condition, he can be easily irritable, and due to this, he finds another strength of his and often becomes the voice of reason for the group. He's still a bit chronically online. He calls himself an Aspie once, which is realistic for the circle of internet the game depicts him around. Keep in mind, this is still 2016. The most 2016 thing the writers could have done to make Josh's character on either spectrum would have been to actively infantilize him or make his most aggressive traits his primary and recurrent ones and define him through that. This is something I have to commend the game for, and something that aged well 100%. Marcus, along with the voices of DedSec, take on a plethora of missions given by their followers, and I think a big reason for why I find the material discussed in this game so novel is that most of the missions are inspired by real-world events, or are adjacent to them. From the Martin Shkreli and Wu-Tang fiasco to Tom Cruise and Scientology, it helps set the tone for pretty much the rest of the game. Mischief over destruction, nurture over nihilism. If you can't take down Bloom and the C2S forcefully, then why not play along with their tools and scare the people powerful enough to change it? DedSec does use these tools very well. Marcus has a much more limited arsenal compared to Aiden and most open-world protagonists. Marcus is only allowed to carry 2 guns and a taser, but to make up for that, he has a plethora of other hacking abilities and gadgets. Players can use the 3D printer in the hackerspace in order to build new guns, both lethal and non-lethal. One weapon I used a ton for my mostly non-lethal run was the stun grenade launcher, which got me out of loud fights where running or the one-bullet taser couldn't. One of the first gadgets players get is the jumper drone, an evolution of the RC drone from Bad Blood. Purely for recon and infiltration at the beginning of the game, the jumper proves to be one of the best tools in Marcus's arsenal, a drone that can check camera blind spots and even hack things the profiler can. Later on, Marcus can 3D print a quadcopter, which has speed and aerial advantage, but I can't physically hack things like the jumper can. These tools make pre-engagement scouting so much more rewarding, as if the level designs had to be toughened up in account of all of these new tools. The hacking has been expanded quite a bit. Instead of everything being controlled with one button, there's a small context-sensitive wheel depending on what you're profiling. Profiling isn't something you just tap a button to open anymore, but a hold-down menu that gives you access to up to 4 different hacks. Pressing the profile button on most enemies distracts them for 10 seconds, allowing you to give them the slip, or if you're targeting infrastructure, you have the ability to call enemies over with a lure or set up a proximity trap so you don't have to keep your eyes on patrols after initial recon. There are 2 types of grenades now, the shot grenade and the IED, non-lethal and lethal respectively, and a mass hack that disrupts all enemies in a radius. Fun mischief bleeds into the core gameplay loop more than most people think. One criticism I hear leveled at this game is since Marcus is such a normal dude, it would not make sense for him to gun down the majority of his enemies. And I do agree. It's odd for Marcus to be able to save corporate whistleblowers from their own self-demise and then 2 seconds later gun down a street block of gang members. It doesn't gel right. In fact, most of the gunplay doesn't gel right with me when compared to the rest of the game, just mechanically. These intricate levels, much better than the modern Ubisoft level in general, can be blown through with gunplay over trickery on most difficulties, except for realistic, which is just the best way to play the series. Gunfights are barely an option on realistic difficulty unless you are really twitchy, but even then, gunfights pale in comparison to simply what is one of the best weapons in the game, the taser. I'm not kidding when I say the taser is stronger than most weapons in the game, being able to one-tap most normal enemies by shooting them anywhere. In basic combat, your reload speed for the taser can be upgraded, making it a competent weapon for engagement provided you are slippery enough. Yes, enemies wake up after a certain time unconscious, but by the time they would wake up, the objective of the mission would most likely be done. Armored enemies take 2 shots to down, making it terrible against them, but simply distracting them by tapping the right bumper can fend them off long enough just to slip past them. Even in big and loud combat, one has access to a non-lethal grenade launcher and paintball assault rifle, and if they have the DLC, access to a stun sniper and air shotgun is possible. The 8-ball flail counts as non-lethal too, but you have me fucked up if I believe that for a second, especially when the 8-ball doesn't leave an enemy mechanically unconscious. It can get you out of sticky situations, but for non-lethal playthroughs, it's simply easier to point and shoot with the taser than watch a canned animation that could leave you compromised to breaking stealth. This isn't me complaining about the core loop of the game. While an enemy isolated from their patrol is easy to take care of, messing up in the slightest means that enemies are alerted through the CTOS to your position, and the stealth has been upgraded to give enemies actual cone of vision and enhanced reaction times. It's still relatively easy, but I value mechanical engagement over raw difficulty anyway, and Watch Dogs 2 has that in spades. One reason I could think to as why Ubisoft left all the lethal weapons in the single player is because there is the option to keep your single player lobby open in the hopes of finding somebody to play through the open world activities with or to engage in randomly selected PvP encounters. They didn't separate this mode this time around, leading to a lot of mechanical oddities in regards to the story. One ability that is super fun, but morally bankrupt for Marcus to use is the ability to SWAT enemies or to start gang wars. The gang war system in this game is fascinating, with a ton of random events centered around it. Very Saints Row 2-esque. However, Marcus calling a gang war in order to clean out an outpost just doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, so I never opted to use it in the single player personally. That can't be said the same for multiplayer. Marcus and the multiplayer character are heavily disconnected from each other, despite the game's insistence on trying to tie it to the main story by positioning invading hackers as being part of the primate faction. You don't see the other players as Marcus, but as the blank slate bald guy they picked at the beginning of the game. I will say this leads to a lot of interesting experience in moment-to-moment gameplay, especially in regards to random co-op. If I saw another player in my lobby gunning down policemen after an outpost snatch and grab gone wrong, I might be tempted to hop in with them. I could also watch someone cause a traffic light pileup and set up ramps to see how far they could send cars over said pileup. At the end of the day, this is still a sandbox, and if I want to share my toys with someone, god damn it, I'm going to. It's the voyeurism theme coming back, sadly with the same level of intelligence and tact as the last game. However, because of the two drastically different gameplay styles, I actually want to observe how people play this game. It's sort of an accidental byproduct of Ubisoft's incompetence. Should the two modes have been separated instead of being a shared open world experience, I don't think most people would be distracted by the lethal arsenal, just contextualize it for a different mode. It's a shame that this game has such a big stain over its combat mechanics because the open world itself is one of the best Ubisoft has made, bar none. San Fran is filled with so much life, enough to compare it to similar virtual cities before, such as Saints Row Stillwater, Grand Theft Auto's Los Santos, and even newer ones like Cyberpunk's Night City. Marcus can interact with civilians on an emote wheel similar to the taunt compliment system from Saints Row. The personalization of Marcus is much nicer this time around as you can customize all of his clothing options. Not just that, but the faction system, consisting of police, security, and gangs, is robust, with them duking it out in the street randomly. There are so many little random events in this game that breathe so much life into the city, like when citizens start smacking cars with baseball bats, or being able to fuck with serial carjackers by hacking their car's movement. The atmosphere of this game is immaculate, with the summer skies beating it down against the established vibrancy of the city. Districts like Kestrel are littered with UV lights giving off such a pretty purple hue. The rain and fog looks great, despite me not being able to play with the dedicated NVIDIA San Francisco fog effects. This game didn't just learn from Watch Dogs 1 on how to make a compelling open world, but read the entire book on how to design one. One reason I feel this way is because the typical Ubisoft busy work has been replaced with genuine discovery. Map markers are a given, but they're used in the context of most urban set games, not requiring someone to climb a half-baked tower in order to discover more reskinned activities. Driving around San Francisco will reward the player with new side quests. Traditional outposts and traditional towers are gone, replaced with much comfier exploration to find research points for new abilities. Some abilities are locked behind a special research point, only earned after a pipe puzzle, drone puzzle, or engaging with an outpost that doesn't require everyone dead to progress. One mission string that kind of blew my mind when I realized what it was doing was the questline where Marcus goes to climb Bay Area iconography to paint DedSec's mark at the behest of Sitara. At the point in the game I was at, I was shocked that the game had enough restraint not to mandate that I climb towers, but I didn't realize that this was a complete mechanical recontextualization of the tower system from the Ubi games of old. This time, they were only an option, one that rewarded me with stunning vistas still very similar to the Assassin's Creed games, and did make sense for Watch Dogs 2's vertically inclined gameplay. By shedding what made Ubisoft games so formulaic, they were able to hone in on one of the stronger aspects of their content to make one of the strongest open worlds. As I've said before, crime and mischief take the center stage for the tone of this game, over destruction and mass murder, and there's no better way to start things off story-wise than with a mission like Cyberdriver, in which DedSec and other hacker groups are being targeted by the titular movie. They have to steal a car from a movie set that's rumored to have top-of-the-line smart car power, courtesy of space race company LLA, and repurpose it for a high-speed tech chase to net DedSec more followers. The crew steal it and find out the car is an entire lie itself. There's nothing advanced about it, but through the power of 90s montage bullshit, they manage to beat Galilei at their own game, forcing that police chase. It really helps that the driving this time around doesn't feel like ass. It isn't too heavy, and with different drivetrains, cars actually feel different from each other. It's a nice wean into the themes of Watch Dogs 2. You got a rather silly mission and a silly enough outcome, and because of this, you're tasked with helping the Wrench with making a home security firm look like a fool on national television. Wrench is an odd character, but a welcome one to the DedSec roster. He wears a hockey mask rigged with LEDs to emote, and is the resident anarchist of the group. A real, by any means necessary type guy, not one to shy away from violence himself. I get the feeling that people mischaracterize the supporting cast as all being very pacifistic and eager to comply with one strict code, but that simply isn't true. There tends to be a lot of small infighting happening with specific members if they don't agree with one another, and even outside sources of help have problems with the way DedSec handles things sometimes. After Cyberdriver, the team targets the New Dawn Corporation, a stand-in for Scientology, being very rotten to the core as they are in real life, threatening people with blackmail and disappearance. Marcus needs to level with Cyberdriver actor Jimmy Siska to get him to speak out against the church, but in order to do that, he needs crucial information about an internment camp they have set up. Marcus calls up Miranda Comey, a councilwoman who struck against the New Dawn early in her career due to them leaking sensitive videos about her transition. Over the course of the game, Miranda serves as Marcus's voice of reason, an older character that can guide Marcus in the right directions as a political activist before he gets seriously hurt, while also understanding that she needs to protect her own career as an honest congresswoman. She'll give Marcus the information he wants because obviously an action against something anyone can stop is antithetical to her beliefs, but also weans Marcus away from dangerous generalization or views that could skew his feeling of the world towards negative. I really like her and Marcus's back and forth, and the two develop an interesting symbiotic relationship, the activist and the relatively youthful in touch politician. The group takes on a bunch of shady basic CEO types alongside attempting to topple false churches, but meets an impasse when they learn that most of their new followers were bots fed to DedSec by social media site Invite. Marcus breaks into their office and comes across the main villain and chief tech officer of Bloom, Dusan Nemec, an egotistical tech bro that we have the unfortunate displeasure of meeting, a monolithic threat for the crew's digital escapades, but a complete tool in person. Dusan is the kind of tech bro that begs for the attention of others, even though he's insistent on not giving two shits. Not to be taken too seriously as a villain due to his over-the-top frailty, I mean his name is Douchebag Nemesis for fuck's sake. He's not people's favorite Ubisoft villain, not mine either, and that's for good reason. Most of the villains the company puts out tend to be the biggest parts of their iconography. Nemec can't compete with characters like Voz and Pagan Min, but he shouldn't be. He's in a league of hateability of his own. Ubisoft tends to make villains comically evil as a call to heroism, and not much else. And for the most part, these types of villains tend to be cliché, such as all of the villains from Watch Dogs 1 itself. But that style of tropiness feeds into this style of writing much more proportionately. Nemec is a perfect fit for the narrative of Watch Dogs 2, a hands-off bloodletter whose weapon of choice is the algorithms that he uses to punch down on marginalized communities. Not even too dissimilar to real life, too, Nemec might be one of Ubisoft's most realistic villains, even if Nemec himself is way the fuck toned down in terms of hateability when compared to real-life tech bros who successfully beg for political positions and buy platforms to spread hate speech. Even if the rest of the cast is significantly weaker than Nemec, they still hold a constant presence in the game when compared to the forgetfulness of the first game. They're supplemental to Nemec as they show us how many sycophants he has in his pocket. But there's one villain in this game that strikes me as excessively out of place. I'm talking about Lenny Kastner, the leader of the enemy hacker faction Primate. Lenny herself, as a character, isn't unlike anything the rest of the game is set up, but in the context of the gameplay systems, her convictions aren't very good and present one of the worst instances of awkwardness in the game's systems. Primate is the primary enemy of the PvP. Players marked as enemies will be tagged as Primate, and most of the time you'll be getting into gunfights because Lord knows that's the playstyle I ran into the most. It's jarring for Lenny to exist in a state where her hatred isn't based on DedSec's blood war with her and her crew, but instead it's just for mockery, for their lack of skills compared to her. Lenny isn't much different compared to the other 90s style villains, but her character motivations just suck in the context of the story provided alongside said systems, but not for the reasons you think. A common criticism I hear leveled at Lenny is that she was based off of the culture wars, a punch down against SJWs. Oh, fucking hell, I hate uttering that word. But if that was true, Lenny simply wouldn't be based off of 4chan ideologies and chud behavior. Oh, fuck, I hate that word too. Lenny is loud, obnoxious, and abusive, and not hateable with murderous intent, but she is just so useless to the main story, a simple 4chan troll. It feels like the game forgets about her as soon as her and Marcus's beef dries up, almost as if they cut out significant portion of her content as a character. The game could have done without the Hacker War storyline, and nothing would change much. If the game was adamant on aligning the single player and multiplayer, Primate's presence in the multiplayer experience might have been stronger for it. Had the game not done this, I feel like Lenny could have been a less distracting character. The rising action of the game is the discouragement that DedSec faces for being blamed for a bot boost. To take their minds off of it, the crew go to Swelter Skelter, a Burning Man type event centered around the joy of hacking, where we're graced with T-Bone's presence once more again. Much more mellowed out from his DLC, T-Bone takes a moment with Marcus, who recognizes him from his legendary hacker days. While Marcus is completely tripping on psilocybin, T-Bone tells him of his fondness of his leadership abilities, which sends Marcus questioning the structure of DedSec, as he never saw himself as a cut-and-dry leader, as everyone pulls their weight in the group. But T-Bone makes it clear that he saw him leading the others into Swelter Skelter, and truthfully, he's right. Marcus galvanized DedSec after his initiation through his social engineering skills and willingness to risk his life. They do look up to him significantly, more than he thinks they do. So he has to make the choice to take that idea and run with it or not, and in the end, I suppose he does, as he cracks a deal with Ray to finish Bloom together, much to the confusion of most of DedSec and the chagrin of Sitara, who was operating on the assumption that they were without leaders. One of the best missions in the game is actually a mission where the gameplay takes a bit of a backseat for slower storytelling. Ray brings the cast up to speed on the bellwether algorithm from the first game, and the search engine firm Noodle seems to have some answers regarding how it's being used in the present. Horatio Carlin, a DedSec member and Noodle employee, sneaks Marcus into Noodle to get more information on Bellwether. Horatio and Marcus have a very interesting dynamic in this mission compared to the rest of the cast, mainly on the account of them being the only two black men on the main cast of DedSec, allowing for a more code-switched conversation dynamic, but once they enter the realm of hipster yuppies, things change in a really off-putting tone. It's fun to listen to Horatio's half-hearted sarcasm towards people getting into fights about superfoods, but it's equal parts fucked up to hear Horatio lament the fact that he has to appear well-mannered due to his complexion instead of just being seen as a normal dude. He feels out of place in Silicon Valley despite computers being a feverish passion for him. It doesn't help that he faces racism at his job with people constantly suspicious that he's up to no good constantly. In the eye of the company, Horatio is up to no good. Simply trying to expose the truth of harmful algorithms isn't going to make the shareholders happy. But in the eyes of the average person, they have more harmful biases against him for simply existing. It just so happens today is the only day where Horatio and Marcus are plotting. Brody is one such character, someone who doesn't have definitive proof on Horatio breaking the law, but due to his biases holds him in low regard, even going as far as to interrogating him and using slang in show of mockery towards him. I have to be real. Sadly, the rest of the game nosedives from here. There is a part of me that absolutely adores this 2016 time capsule that Watch Dogs has stuck itself into. But the problem is that it is a 2016 time capsule. Things have changed. People's perception on tech bros and big tech have changed completely since then. And it's because of that Watch Dogs 2 comes across as a little naive and underdeveloped when it comes to its ideals. Whether this was to intentionally avoid really taking a stance on things is debatable. Watch Dogs 2's side content often comes to grips with darker what-ifs than the main story. One of the side stories casts Marcus into uncovering the corruption of the San Francisco Police Department and has him tugging with Miranda on whether the police department can even be reformed if corruption stemmed from the top of the chain of command. It's left in the air as to who the player should agree with, but the odd thing that stands out to me is how the mission is completely structured like a main mission, complete with a cutscene of Dushan crashing out at the end. Maybe this mission was cut from the main story to avoid ruffling feathers, as gutless as that sounds, meaning that half of Watch Dogs 2 is a rather fun techno-mischief romp, while the other half is just as scatterbrained in direction as the first game. Although, I'd rather take the dorky, naive kid that listens to sorority noise any day of the week over the fucking incel freak who listens to Pinkerton-era Weezer. One hilarious trope I have picked up over my years in gaming is that if a main character isn't involved in any side content whatsoever, then that character is most likely going to die. Guess who hasn't been showing up a whole ton since his introduction? If you guessed Horatio, you'd be correct. Eye for an Eye is the biggest point of contention in the main story of Watch Dogs 2 for how out of left field it comes. Not only did the writers choose to sacrifice Horatio for the sake of bloody shootouts, the entire tone is off-puttingly dark. Horatio is repeatedly stabbed by the leaders of the Tesca's gangs for refusing to give up critical DedSec information, holding off long enough for Marcus to get there, but ultimately succumbs to his wounds. Marcus then enacts revenge on the entire Tesca's gang over the course of an hour, going from operation to operation, blowing through each one with vengeance. Marcus does have a short fuse when it comes to injustice, enough of one to the point where he finds characters like Aiden cool for his vigilantism. Everybody loves a vigilante, Marcus says during the mission where he has to help Aiden escape imprisonment from gang members. It's why I don't fully mind the idea of a Marcus that kills people in spades, especially when he's so close to T-Bone and Wrench. But what I don't buy is a Satara and Josh that condone that kind of violence or revenge. The crew is only okay with destroying precious drug cargo when it's for revenge. The game says to neutralize the target, but what lesson is tasing a person going to do for gang members like Pablo the Skinner? That already feels out of place in a game like Watch Dogs 2 and more in line with something dreary like Watch Dogs 1. It's the only time in the game where the player is encouraged by the game to kill NPCs instead of pacification, and I engage with it as such. And when Horatio or the gangs are never mentioned in the main story again, I felt robbed. When Marcus's violence or DedSec's bloodlust is forgotten about, I can't help but agree with the main criticisms of the game itself. This doesn't belong in the same game as college go-kart races. I felt robbed of a good character dynamic just because it felt like Ubisoft got scared and remembered, hey, our fans love that revenge stuff, just throw them a short revenge story to get the fans of the first game back. It begets the tone of Watch Dogs 2 for edgy schlock, and even so, Horatio is the only character in the main story that canonically dies. The rest of the game is genuinely non-lethal, even up to its ending. It feels cheap. Moving away from that, the rest of the main story sort of jumps the shark. The crew uses Galilei satellites to overload Bloom headquarters around the world, blacking out major sectors, and T-Bone is just fine with this, mind you. They find a 10-year plan with Bloom to galvanize every corporation under Bloom's pocket, and learn of the plan to use Bellwether as an algorithm to train robots for riot combat. And this is resolved in a rather bloody spider tank section where you blast through tight securities listening to The Prodigy. While cool out of context, it is still mostly tonally inappropriate. The final mission puts you in the shoes of all of DedSec as they take down Dushan with all of the evidence they have found. And it starts out funny enough, and the climax with Marcus has him shout in disbelief that his crewmates don't know Danny Brown, which got a really good laugh out of me. However, it falls apart when the plan to get Dushan out of commission is to simply let him get arrested, which is odd. The San Francisco Police Department is shown to be deeply corrupt at this point. Wouldn't they just let the rich dude walk, provided he posted bail? He'll lose his job at Bloom, but the game really doesn't think of heads, sort of leaning into that naivety that I mentioned earlier. It's a rather nothing ending that goes to set up a third game rather than providing a satisfying ending. Watch Dogs 2 is the rare case of Ubisoft trying to say something, even if it still rings hollow a quarter of the time spent with it. After all, it's still a game that will scream anarchy, but the main billionaire villain will simply walk away in handcuffs. It's a game style begging to be put in the hands of artists with no corporate interference whatsoever. I wish Watch Dogs 2 was a game fully independent of Ubisoft's general incompetence. I just do wish that Watch Dogs was able to find its tonal and artistic balance, but that proved less possible than I thought it was. I'm not even sure how to start with this one, honestly, but I'll try. Fuck it, this game didn't even try, so why should I? Every time I try to sit here and write a single page for this game, I can't. A little behind the scenes tidbit for y'all, but I've tried to make this video for the last 5 years. This has been my biggest white whale for the longest time, but I could never put the words together in the ways that I wanted to express them. I feel like I got to that point with the first two games, and I'm rather satisfied with the end product myself, and that also falls on your personal enjoyment of the video. So if you have made it this far, I have to say thank you deeply for watching. This video was a massive labor of love from everyone around me, and an effort of spite towards this series. We may not agree on everything here, but being able to yabber on this website about things I'm passionate about is amazing. And I hope to see more people in this community soon. The door is always open for you to join. If there is a part I got stuck on the most while writing this retrospective, it would be the part about Legion. Everything you see is what you get when you play this game, so I feel like there wouldn't be any way to dissect this game without relying on not talking about the game on offer. Most of my writing would be trailing on to talking about better external material that wipes this game's ass, or it would be comparing it to the other games in the series, which isn't that much different than what most people like Noah Gervais, Snaker, or That Boy Aqua have done already. I personally had an entire spiel about how impactful Clint Hawking's other games were compared to this game. Hell, playing through the Splinter Cell series is the main reason why this video didn't come out as my first video this year. I felt like even comparing the density of Splinter Cell's mechanics to this game would be a coughing baby versus a hydrogen bomb moment. So, lengthy foreword aside, here is a revision of my Steam review of the game, because if Ubisoft couldn't be fucked with this game whatsoever, then why should I? Watch Dogs Legion is not a conventionally bad game. I say this because I understand that this game has its fans, and truthfully, none of the systems put in place for this game are actually broken. You won't be coming across Mind's Eye or Saints Row 22 levels of game-breaking bullshit or devastatingly outdated gameplay ideals. This is, by all means, still a AAA, graphically impressive, if you don't play it on Xbox One like I did, passable product. But I think that's where the problems lie. Watch Dogs as a series are product. They aren't artwork. They're product with a really impressive art team. Like, yeah, Watch Dogs Legion does bite a little too hard visually from The Purge, but I think that England looks pretty in the PC footage that I've seen of the game, and they got the dreary atmosphere right. From what I've heard from Londoners, Legion doesn't muck up the accuracy of the open world as bad as Watch Dogs 1's Chicago, but it's not nearly as impressive as Watch Dogs 2's San Fran. Although, like all the games in the series, Watch Dogs Legion is a misrepresentation in the virtual tourism aspect of this game, of the series. Like, yeah, Watch Dogs 1's Chicago is just bad, and Watch Dogs 2's San Fran is a little bit too clean for a depiction of the Bay Area. But I have to say that the Albion regime is one of the cleanest authoritarian states I've ever seen in a piece of media, and it's sort of insensitive to portray the looming threat of digital authoritarianism in the UK as a sci-fi punk romp with robots and spider mechs. Combine that with a core gameplay identity that is considerably worse than the second game, and a checklist-style approach to objectives that the series tried escaping with the second game, and Watch Dogs Legion is simply boring and a waste of time. I wish I could leave it there, but I spent 15 hours on this game, and I already spent a little bit more on the DLC. Watch Dogs Legion has what I can only describe as spite for its player base. It has this deep-seated contempt for anyone playing through it. It hates its core base of Watch Dogs fans. It's beyond me why anybody really cares about this series as much now. It hates the people that are simply coming to give the game a shot. It hates people like me who are trying to give the series a chance, but fails to show me any reason why this series should keep going. Everything in this game is spitefully designed, from the grindy objectives to the rebalanced online modes that take the novel invasion concepts of the first game and bastardizes them to sell a battle pass. Hell, the main level design is so afraid to actually have you interact with any of the emergent systems in the game. When I tried to first play the game back in 2020, the snarky AI Marvel bitch boy Bagley lampshades the fact that I couldn't proceed with infiltrating a mansion on my own terms, barking at me to take a drone instead. This entire game is like this, either interchangeable proc-gen objectives in the open world or an adherence to borderline walking sim design when trying to tell the story. Bagley is a manifestation of this contempt towards the player, definitively becoming my least favorite character in the entire medium of gaming. Funny enough, this game does try to take a stand against Aiden-centric actions. There's a character named Nigel Cass, who is by all means a dead ringer for Aiden in Watch Dogs 1. He's using predictive algorithms to try to take down criminals before they can strike, even if it means extrajudicially killing false flag targets. I can get behind this, because that was a massive discrepancy I had with the first two games, as it really felt weird to see the game criticize Big Brother and then write in a gray man theory protagonist that could have the same character as Big Brother but was postured as good instead. Watch Dogs could take an opportunity to walk back some of Watch Dogs 1's disgusting and Watch Dogs 2's naive political stances and finally grow up. Instead, Watch Dogs Legion sells you iconography from the first two games as DLC and makes them unequivocally better than a majority of the normal characters, and then fillets their worst traits still. It is off-putting to watch Aiden berate a man about a practice he himself indulges in, but since Aiden is OC Donut Steel, he has to be right all the time. Ubisoft cannot write morally gray characters. They have to be marketable, sellable, they have to be right. Ubisoft cannot even write villains to take seriously anymore, with all of these villains being comically evil cock-ups, except for like Sky Larson, who brings this sort of off-the-wall Black Mirror energy, and it's no wonder why she's the only villain from the base game that is featured prominently in the DLC. That is what sorts most of pre-2016 Ubisoft from the modern dreck that they produce. This has to be the most artless game I have ever played. It postures Bloody Revolution as a fun time, its proc-gen dialogue made it so I couldn't give two shits about the story at all, and the world is so comically stupid that it is hard to take seriously, which is my problem with the entire series. Without hyperbole, I think this is the worst game I have ever played. Have I played worse games mechanically? Yes. The difference there is time investment, and games I have covered on this channel like Redfall and Wolfenstein Youngblood are undoubtedly worse games than this, but I didn't have to spend close to 20 hours in those games. Hell, I think games that do have this sort of artistic spite for the player can be cool and interesting. See Drakengard or Hotline Miami 2. But this isn't an artistic game. This is barely a video game. This is hell sent back to you in the form of a digital purchase. Run from it. Dread it. After the smoke clears from the main campaign, players can choose between three options: a money-hungry online mode, a fucking zombie extraction shooter, and Bloodline, a prequel DLC starring the Pierce Boys and Wrench. And oddly enough, I kind of loved my time with this. If I had to describe my relationship towards the Watch Dogs narrative right now, I would say I'm shackled to a story that has too little artistic merit for me to care. I'm writing this section weeks after I wrote my Legion piece, weeks after I beat the Bloodline DLC. For a moment, I was riding the high that Bloodline provided. After all, it was a return to the more linear, set-piece-driven style of the first game, which were easily the best parts of that game. Bloodline's reevaluation of Watch Dogs' gameplay loop, while also being shackled to the bare bones of Legion's gameplay systems, put this DLC in a weird limbo where Ubisoft had to examine everything wrong with the base game and work around those limitations. The results, shockingly enough, lead to the best the Watch Dogs formula has ever been up to this point. It's a playful mix of that Watch Dogs 2 trickery and the quick violence of the first game. It helps that this narrative doesn't take itself nearly as seriously as you'd think an Aiden Pierce romp would. It's relatively lighthearted, considering how bleak and constricting the first game's narrative is, and considering the stage it's set on. Ubisoft has already proven that they do not care about maturity in the slightest when developing Legion's base game, so concessions had to be made for this narrative. Concessions seem to be the main idea with Bloodline. It feels like this apology tour rolled out too late, if anything. It's a 5-hour character study on a character who really didn't deserve any more examinations. Yet I will agree with fans on this. Aiden's characterization here isn't bad. In fact, the newer, pulpier thriller narrative helped me warm up to him a little bit more than I had anticipated, and I feel like that's on part of Jack's inclusion in this narrative. Oddly enough, this chiseled chucklefuck ended up being one of my favorite characters in the series. Jax is an affirmation in response to both the in-world and real-world reactions to Aiden. Early into Wrench's section of the game, the two argue about what the comatose Irishman would do in the situation they are in. And Jax gets really fed up with Reggie's desire to be more like Aiden. Wrench eye-rollingly hypothesizes a scenario where Uncle Aiden saves the day, and Jax hits him with, "You and everyone put Aiden on a pedestal. Either he's the coolest vigilante or he's the worst villain. It's weird because he's also my uncle that frankly kept putting me in danger and then just stopped showing up." That's Bloodline's thesis in a nutshell, to find out if there is anything in between those two extremes of narrative examination. What made Watch Dogs the first so dry and unpalpable was the game's insistence of the Pierce family, that the players had to care about them from the get-go. There are barely any introductions before Aiden starts mucking about with their life. There is no narrative thread to deconstruct here, so Bloodline has to do the heavy lifting here. I said before that the relationship between Aiden and Jax was the only thing that somewhat worked for me in the first game, because I could see the primal vestiges of competent storytelling bloom from the inert manure of the narrative. In a vacuum, removed from the lack of player agency and action, Aiden's character shined when it was him stumbling to find the words for Jax. It was Aiden at an impasse, actual conflict instead of tropes shoved his way. Well, Jackson Pierce is now all grown up now, and he's honestly been better off without Aiden. Shocker. Yet, the Tyza family compels him to help Aiden bury whatever demons he needs to be buried. Aiden has been diluted to his work now. This is the most pathetic this character has been so far, without as much romanticization from his last couple of appearances. People know the Fox, people haven't forgotten about the Fox, but people do not care about the Fox. A washed-up has-been vigilante from a bygone era where developers still thought that gray color palettes and snappy gunplay was all that was needed to make a game dark and gritty. Oddly enough, seeing Aiden finally lose sort of made me root for him a little bit more. The gloves were off. Ubisoft was not above making Aiden this street sweeper god. He'd have to earn that status back bit by bit. Yet, what if in between games, Aiden lost the compulsion to be the vigilante, losing the spark, going through the motions instead of enacting his righteous justice with his baton and ball cap? Aiden has seen some shit after dedicating himself to the cause, and his resolve becomes shaken. He becomes bitter to the idea that the world could ever change, and all he wants to do is get back what he'd thrown away in the past. The relationship between Aiden and Jax blooms because of this shift in personality. Aiden has thrown all the hope in the world away, and all that matters is Jackson's safety. Meanwhile, Jax couldn't care less about his own well-being if the people around him are being stomped on. Jax ignites something new in Aiden, and while it is the corny spark of gleeful revolution that Ubisoft fetishizes, there's something about how the revolution is presented here that keeps me from not hating it completely. Throughout Ubisoft's modern library, this boring examination of liberation sweeps through every lens of the developer's work. In the case of Ghost Recon Wildlands, the repulsive cartel state jingoism bounces off of an otherwise interesting gameplay loop. Far Cry 6, which, funny enough, is also developed by Ubisoft Toronto, holds the same unpalpable reservations towards historical imagery that Legion does. That Revolution will be a delightful playground paradise filled with tons to do, while tragedy patiently waits for the most dramatic moment, and is aptly forgotten about in favor of firework guns. Bloodline knows that it is not smart enough to actually examine what brings a community to revolt, but it has heart in the places that matter. Some fights are just worth losing, is the main idea here, placated by Jax and then repeated merrily by Aiden when he catches up with Reggie. It's the remnants of Watch Dogs 2's most important thematic flourish. Watch Dogs 2 was 90s hacker culture retrofitted into the modern hacktivist activity. Bloodline is 80s optimism retrofitted into a fictional 2030s sci-fi romp. It's that same energy as Weird Al's Dare to Be Stupid, the goof song turned revolution anthem of the Autobots in the 1986 Transformers movie. It's simple, but it holds so much more weight than pretending to be dark for gamer brownie points. The over-the-top sci-fi veneer of Bloodline lends itself to the best parts of the series' storytelling so far. Sky Larson, the only interesting villain in the base game, offers Wrench and Jax a way into Aiden's subconscious to wake him from his coma. That's right, baby, we're hacking into Uncle Aiden's brain. I didn't expect Silent Hill imagery to appear in the series whatsoever, but a break from the cyber monotony is welcome. It sits in this halfway point between campy and surreal, drawing inspirations from Remedy's own noir work. And while the writing is heavy-handed, it's played with a genuine sincerity that I've sorely missed from Ubisoft. This isn't just Jax and Aiden burying the past, but Ubisoft burying the legacy of Aiden Pierce once and for all, allowing him to shape into a developed character should the studio ever want to use him again. What hurts the most about this DLC is while Aiden gets a ton of characterization and heart, Wrench is sort of left with table scraps, cleaning up the stuff that wouldn't be thematically appropriate for Aiden to care about anymore. The main villain, Thomas Rempart, is an obvious Handsome Jack XP that stole Wrench's robot patent, the same robots that Aiden has been mowing down for the game's first couple of hours. Wrench wants revenge against Rempart, and Aiden is there to guide him against that. Even then, the Pierces follow suit in Wrench's fight against the tech douche's Destiny Strike, and Reggie walks away before he can do anything drastic to Rempart, leaving him in the hands of Albion. Yeah, I guess it's better to leave your enemies in the hands of Mecha Himmler rather than do anything else. The ending is messy and leads into the worst part about Bloodline, the fact that it is a prequel to Watch Dogs Legion. I guess I was wrong about the whole Skinwalker taking Aiden's body thing, but it doesn't make his characterization in the base game any less unsettling and underwritten. Likewise, it sucks that it took 3 games and a DLC for Aiden to finally become interesting at all, but Ubisoft managed it in the last stretch. That's what we're left for with Bloodline, a DLC that tries so hard to hold your attention towards the Watch Dogs series one last time, a series that doesn't understand genre conventions to examine them with a lens, let alone understands them at all. It's fascinating to me that the best part of the series isn't a blockbuster game, but a DLC for a game that already doesn't have too much goodwill towards it anyways. When your series' best narrative and gameplay experience is sandwiched between one middling, borderline bad game, one game with great gameplay and a mediocre story, and the biggest piece of artless dreck I've ever laid my eyes upon, it might be time to throw in the towel. I don't think that any new game, movie, novel, manga, battle royale, or children's daytime TV show is going to save this franchise from mediocrity. Watch Dogs is a study on how not to handle mature themes in media while also being a demonstration of how out of touch Ubisoft is with the rest of the world. Thank you deeply for watching if you have made it this far. This was by far my most taxing project yet, and I'm so fucking glad to be done with this. If you decide to stick around, I have more videos coming out soon, but content is going to see a little bit of a shakeup. These longer videos take so much work to do for, sadly, little pickup, and I guess I'll have to sacrifice my soul to the YouTube algorithm. That is not to say that the quality of the videos will be changing, it's just that I'll be covering one game at a time, 2 times a month from here on out. Hopefully, this upload schedule feels more consistent for me, and hopefully you continue to enjoy it. Thank you again so much for sticking it out, even if you do disagree with me. Hey, that children's TV show thing wasn't a joke, by the way. This is really happening.